You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
And what's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome back to the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network. This is your Los Angeles Chargers edition of the show, talking all things Bolts. Final segment on radio here on the Mightier 1090 ESPN. And for Chargers fan out there, this is the podcast. Obviously, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. You can find us Chargers LAFB, or just go to LAFBnetwork.com. And we got obviously plenty of other Charger stuff. Chargers Unleashed is on the network. We got all of our articles and stuff like that, and all of our shorts and everything you need to get your fill for Chargers football. So joined as always by the madman, Mr. Jamal. Madni, what's up, brother? Final segment on radio. We're getting through it. It's been a lot of fun as always. How we doing?
Doing great, Rye. Excited to talk Bolt fam and see how intriguing this is going to be come next week, because it's so interesting with the Rams kind of out of it in terms of the early rounds and just kind of where they are from the standpoint of strategic positioning. The Chargers really get to take center stage in LA for the draft. And so I think it's really another unique opportunity for the Chargers to be LA's team, de facto team, for a 2, 3, 4 day period over the course of the draft, because they have more skin in the game. So I'm always excited when that's the case for the Chargers as they continue to get embedded in the Los Angeles community.
Yeah, well, and it's cool. You know, we will be down at our good buddy Jake Hefner. He hosts the Chargers Unleashed show with Dan.
Not to be confused with Hugh Hefner.
Yeah, he's his long lost son. You know, of the many relationships that old Hugh Hefner had. He's not. I don't quote me on that. But, you know, I like to tell Jake that all the time. Like, what's it like being the son of Hugh Hefner? Have you ever met him? Or but anyway, he does a draft party every year. We're going to be down there. Skinny T, you're going to try to make it. Will Decker, myself, Dan. We're going to do a live draft show from 2 to 4 from his place. We'll be doing Rams and Chargers talk, just kind of all draft talk. But obviously, we'll be really, really good with Chargers, being that's day one of the draft. But what I think is so cool, the Chargers have now done, I want to say this is their third year doing it, is they do a really big draft party every year hosted by the team. The team puts it on. I want to say last year was at Santa Monica Pier, if I'm not mistaken. Last year or 2 years ago, they for sure did one at Santa Monica Pier. This year, it's in Century City, in your neck of the woods, actually, right down by there. And so I think that's really cool that they do that, get the fans involved, have them come out. And so like I said, I will not be there because we're doing our own kind of draft thing, doing a live show. But if you don't have plans, Charger fans, you want to be around the Bolt fam, you can, I'm sure, find more info. I'm not a spokesperson by any means, but I'm sure you can find more info at like chargers.com. But I know it's in Century City. So I just think that's cool. They do that. Try to get involved in the community. That's our stitch, right?
Absolutely. And what a fun area to do it in as well, Ryan. I mean, the Century City Mall is just one of the crown jewels of the city. I think the one mall that really got it right, the one mall that is not going to get displaced in any way, shape, or form because of elements like this, where they turn it into an experience and really make it very meaningful. So it'll be a great time, a great evening, and folks should try and come out as much as they can.
Yeah, it is a really cool mall. The LA Marathon finished there, just whatever it was last month. Unfortunately, on a rainy day, but we had family that ran on it, so we went and checked it out. And yeah, it's a very cool indoor, outdoor mall. So anyway, check that out. But the draft, it's crazy. Week away. Less than a week away, depending when you're listening to this. Thursday, April 27th. Chargers are pick 21. It seems like everyone's been talking at it ad nauseum. Where do they go? What position do they do? So we'll do some talk. You know, we're a week away. We got to do a little more draft focus on this. And there's definitely some interesting ways they can go. We mentioned it last week, or I should say Monday, on our Monday Night Live show, kind of about, you know, the Jalen Guyton signing that happened on Monday. How big of news that was. I called it back in January or February that, to me, that was their biggest and most important free agent re-signing, just because it gave them flexibility of what they could do, not only in free agency, but in the draft, because it gave them that speed at the position that they've been needing. Obviously, he was out all of last year due to injury. You can blame, the offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi. You can blame other factors, but I think that definitely played a part, just not having his speed on the field, because the previous year, Joe Lombardi's still the OC, and they definitely had a more explosiveness over the top, if they will. So bringing him back, I think, certainly helps. However, I definitely don't think it takes them out of the running for a receiver if a guy they love falls there. So we touched on it, but let's dive a little deeper into it. Just kind of your overall thoughts first on the Guyton signing. Do you like the signing? Do you think it takes him out of the wide receiver sweepstakes, or it still keeps him kind of even keel with what they could do at 21?
No, Ryan, I think, I love the signing, at the price. I think that, considering what they presumably got for him, and, the terms are still not out yet, but, you have to think it's kind of in, as you said, Ryan, that vet minimum range, maybe $1 million, maybe $2 million, somewhere there. And given that he's blown the top off of defenses in the past and provides that dimension as a perfect complement to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, it makes all the sense in the world. Now, to your point, does it force them now to have to draft a wide receiver? No. And I think that gives you kind of autonomy, that gives you agency, that really sort of empowers you in terms of your decision-making. Having said that, if there's a guy that they're absolutely in love with in rounds 1 or 2, I think they have to really consider it and weigh that with the tight end prospects, especially the top 2, that I think they're going to have a position to draft at 21, and we'll see what happens there. So to me, long story short, I think it alleviates some of the concerns. But if they get the guy that they're absolutely in love with at 21, I think you got to pull the trigger.
Totally. And just to go back to his contract, and there's no fault to you. It literally came out not very long ago, probably when we started recording. But it's a 1-year deal for $1.08 million. Okay. So, a steal. Yeah. Like what are you doing here? Yeah. Essentially the vet minimum, like barely over the vet minimum. Yeah. What's crazy about Guyton, and I know there's mixed reviews about him with fans, obviously has the speed, but, has had some history of drop issues and whatnot. But the dude's only 25 still. He is super young. And if this is definitely a prove it year, a 1-year, $1 million deal, that if he can be really involved and do some big things, and, I'm not saying he's going to get a huge payday, but, could get a very nice 4-year to, $15 million deal and kind of get himself set. So happy for him to be able to come back off that injury and hopefully really supplant himself in the offense. I'd be curious, Jamal, let me ask you this before and I know you surmised a little bit about the draft, but we'll jump into that more in a minute. But seeing Kellen Moore and how he runs his offense, and, he does a lot of very good things. He obviously runs a lot of 12 personnel. They do a lot of different run design plays to kind of take the pressure off the quarterback, but then it also opens things up for the running back. Brett Coleman did a very awesome breakdown, partnered with the Chargers about kind of what the Kellen Moore offense looks. Everyone, and this is no fault to anyone because everyone does it, not just fans, but everyone just immediately thinks guy with speed means big, long 60-yard bombs. In a Kellen Moore offense, from what you've seen, from what I've seen, we can dive into it. Do you think that even necessarily means that, or does he do things to, whether it's disguising things or using guys differently that open space up, that it doesn't really matter if you're a 4-2 guy or a 4-5 guy? Obviously, it helps having that speed, but it's not necessarily a requirement like some other guys call offenses. How do you kind of see his involvement with Kellen Moore?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ryan. It's a great question. I think Kellen Moore is a master of space and a master of drawing attention away from certain areas of the field. And that's really what he uses his speed guys for. It's really to sort of pull the defense from one side to the other or move a safety in a particular direction that then opens up space to sort of have some chunk yardage plays. Because if you look back, Ryan, the last couple of years, as much success as Kellen Moore has had as being one of the top 3 to 5 minds in the NFL, and that has translated into a lot of points for the Dallas Cowboys. How many times did you actually see Dak just chuck it deep, over the last couple of years? How many times did he have balls that were 50, 55, 60 yards in the air? Very rare. More often than not, the big plays for the Cowboys were 25-yard plays where the wide receiver was really wide open and got a lot of yak to sort of turn it into this gigantic play. And so Moore needs speed. But Moore needs speed more as an enabler to open up other space on the field rather than the speed is the direct reason why you're getting the big plays. And I think that's what Guyton is going to be able to do, which also then brings into question, how would you play with another receiver? Do you need another receiver in the first round if he's going to be more of kind of a space detour, more of a space camouflage type of person? Obviously, get their catches as well, but you're not relying solely on this vertical pass game in the same way as, say, the Packers used to do with Rodgers and others. And so I think that's what makes Moore so unique.
And looking at the draft now, specifically at receiver, and this is just my opinion, but I think now if you go receiver at 1, which I still think is a possibility, but to me, you're drafting Keenan Allen's eventual replacement. Is basically what you're doing, especially when you look at the type of guys that will be there at 1, whether it's Jordan Addison, whether it's Zay Flowers, whether a Jaxon Smith-Njigba drops to 21, which to me, that's a slam dunk if he's there at 21. But all those guys are similar in style of play as a Keenan Allen. And Keenan Allen, we love, thinks still very good, still a top, when healthy, probably top 15 guy in the league. But, getting up there in age and as they say, if you can draft a replacement, you do it. If it benefits your team and you're not like have other needs at other positions, then why would you do it? So to me, you add really valuable depth in terms of weaponry for Justin Herbert this year, but basically that draft pick signifies that Keenan Allen would be gone in 2024. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree there, Ryan. I think it's Keenan Allen, is sort of exit stage, right? B, you could be using as trade bait, because if you sort of get, you get one of these guys and maybe the need isn't as high, but you've got needs elsewhere. Can you parlay that into a nice package of getting what you want? And I think for the Chargers, here's really the equation for me. It's very simple. If Smith-Njigba or Addison are at 21, you got to take them. Yeah. It would be really hard for me to justify not taking one of those guys if they're sitting at 21. If neither guy is on the board at 21, you have to take Michael Mayer. I mean, to me, it's sort of that simple. And I don't see a world where if all 3 of those guys are off the board, then you take Kincaid. I mean, and I don't see a world where all 4 of those guys are going to be gone, in the first 20 picks. So to me, their first round equation is simple. And I actually think Addison and Smith-Njigba are going to go before that. And then it becomes a question of which tight end they like more, which I think is probably the position they need more this year than, say, Keenan Allen's replacement. But the fact that Addison, to me, Addison even more than Smith-Njigba in some cases, Ryan, he is just such a professional wide receiver, the route runner, the versatility. That is a guy that is a future potential All-Pro. And so if he's there, even if it's not the thing that you needed this year and you're a little suboptimal, you can try and find a way to get a tight end in the later rounds. I can't pass up on Jordan Addison.
Is Addison your wide receiver 1 in this year's draft?
No question. No question. It's not Smith-Njigba even. It's not Flowers. It is Jordan Addison. When you look at his skill set and when you look at the NFL game today, it is Jordan Addison. And when you look at overlaying him onto a Kellen Moore offense, we just talked about Jalen Guyton as being a bit of a space eater and a decoy given the camouflage that Kellen Moore likes to run. And now you're going to put a Jordan Addison with his route running ability, his precision, his quickness, his hands to be that void in those open spaces. And with Justin Herbert's arm, it's like taking candy from a baby. This is a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, they're both so good. I personally, and it's close, and I love Jordan Addison. We covered him, got to meet him at USC, watched every single game of his, saw how good he is. So I see a lot of people like not high enough on boards, kind of similar to what like Zach Charbonnet is, which is, I'm seeing more boards with Zach Charbonnet out of the top 5, which is insane to me, but that's a different conversation. But Addison is so good. I personally have Smith-Njigba like 1A, Addison 1B, and here's why, and I'll explain it quickly. And this is not really any science to it, and teammates, you're always going to gush over their guys, obviously, but when you look at, and I'm not saying anyone said anything bad about Addison by any means, but just when you look at the past USC receivers, and in Drake London's freshman year, you had Michael Pittman Jr., you had Tyler Vaughns, you had Amon-Ra St. Brown, and you had a freshman Drake London. Pittman, all three of those guys, not named London, had 1,000-yard seasons. London, as a freshman, had almost 600 yards. I mean, it was a dynamic offense that season with those guys. Every single one of those guys said Drake London by far has more talent than any of them in space. Like, all of them came out and said, this guy is going to be an elite receiver. We've seen how good Michael Pittman is with the Colts. We've seen how good Amon-Ra St. Brown has been with the Lions. At Ohio State, just 2 years ago now, last year was kind of skewed because
he was hurt.
Smith-Njigba missed pretty much the entire year due to injury. Yep. 2 years ago, you have Garrett Wilson, you have Chris Olave, you have Smith-Njigba. Wilson and Chris Olave both go in the top 15. They both said during their time, Smith-Njigba by far is the best receiver on this roster, has more talent than both. They both said that. So I hear things like that, and the tape is very close. Love Jordan Addison, but when you get that glowing review of your peers and you see how good your peers are, 2 first-round picks, who, by the way, both had very good rookie seasons with, by the way, very subpar or bad quarterbacks, I'm saying, okay, this Smith-Njigba kid, if healthy, is probably pretty damn special. So both are great. It's so close, 1A, 1B, but for that reason, why I had Drake London as my far and away number one last year, and he was the number one receiver taken at overall, is why I have Smith-Njigba as my barely number one receiver this year. So if he falls to 21, game over. Run the pick to the board, take Smith-Njigba, add to that weaponry to Justin Herbert.
No, I mean, it's a great point, Ryan. I love the analogy and so well said and hard to argue. And I think it comes down to a matter of preference as well. And I think that, to me, I think they're both going to be very, very good. And I just sort of look at what is Kellen Moore's system and what does he try and take advantage of? And when he's trying to take advantage of asymmetry on the field, you need guys that can get to those spots. And I have not seen a more fluid route runner at the collegiate level the last 4, 5, 6 years than Jordan Addison. I mean, it was unreal. I mean, that USC-UCLA game, Ryan, I think people kind of forget it. Caleb Williams had a couple throws where his back heel was just above the end zone line, the back end zone line of UCLA. And he was so comfortable making throws because Addison in that situation, in that spot, had 5, 6, 7 yards of separation because the way he was coming out of his breaks, I mean, guys were, doing ballet moves out there because they were spinning around like a top. I mean, just the way his ability to run routes. He reminds me of Ike Bruce, and Bruce was just such an incredible combination of speed and precision in terms of route running. Same slender body. They don't get hurt. That's the other piece, right, is that durability piece. And I think the way Addison plays the game of how he can create that space, catch, and then get down right away, and is very smart with when he accelerates. He only accelerates when he feels like he can get to a corner, he can make a big play, find a sideline, or go all the way. And so that durability for me is also a big one. Smith-Njigba, a couple of fluke injuries a little bit, but, to miss a whole college season off of, aches and pains, that's to me, if you're sort of comparing, Miss Universe with Miss World, you're sort of getting into that nitty gritty of one over the other. So it's just for those very minor reasons, I'm more of an Addison guy.
Yeah, I think they're both going to be great, and obviously love Addison being here at USC. So it'll be interesting to see. And I agree. I think they're going to go higher than people think. Everyone's calling this a very weak receiver class, which it's not as strong as the last few have been because the last few have been 6 or 7 deep with how great. But I think
it's just as good, if not better, frankly, at the top.
Exactly. I think they're being very disrespectful to Smith-Njigba and to Addison because I think those two would have, I haven't watched as much film as some of the other big draft guys, but I watched every single one of Addison's game, watched a lot of tape on Smith-Njigba's sophomore year. And I think you could really put those guys in the likes of the last class's those two. Now, this class just isn't as deep, which is why it's not getting the same respect. But I think at the end of the day, both guys will probably be gone before 21. But if not, would be a great pick for the Chargers. And last thing I'll say, Jamal, because we're a minute left here. I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers go defense here. I know, and I agree with you. I think if they don't go receiver, a tight end makes a ton of sense. We talked a few episodes ago about the history of first-round tight ends, but I just think the talent of Mayer or Kincaid, what they would add, or Meyer, or Kincaid, what they could add to this Kellen Moore offense when you don't have one of those true tight end prototypes with what they have on the roster right now is hard to pass up. But I wouldn't be shocked if they add a corner based on J.C. Jackson's current coming back from injury. If they add an edge guy, you have obviously Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, but Bosa has had some injury history as of late. Mack is getting up there, older in age. And after those two guys, your depth is not it's not great. I mean, you got Rumpf, you got some other guys there, but it's not like elite deep depth that they could, if they can add a guy like Nolan Smith, if he drops that far. So I didn't give you any time to rebuttal that, because we're out of it. But I think next week on Monday, we'll probably do another mock draft. It's the final week of the draft. So we'll really dive into Chargers draft and have some fun with it. But that is all the time we got for Chargers Talk. That's all the time we got on radio. Full 2 hours flies right on by. For Jamal Madni, I'm Ryan Dyrud. Thank you as always for tuning in. We'll see everyone on Monday for LAFB Live. Everyone have a blessed weekend. Talk to y'all then.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.